to the Festival of Homiletics. I learned a lot of great things, but it kind of made me all confused at the same time. We had 25, 30 different speakers who had different takes on what we need to be doing as preachers. And some of them would say one thing, you go to the next workshop and it'd be the totally opposite thing. Have you ever gone to a professional conference where they've done that kind of thing before, and then you just leave home totally confused about what the right thing to do is? Now, I stayed in the Hotel Indigo, and I think I was telling you that this hotel was made out of an office facility. It was the first high-rise in San Antonio, built in 1908. So it's this old building that was full of marble. I did not see a ghost. I told you a couple of weeks ago, it was the most haunted place in San Antonio. But I do have to say, the elevator took a full 4 minutes from the ground floor to the 8th floor. 4 long minutes. Slower than the hospital elevators at Winchester. Now, I learned something last week, and I learned it just by kind of observing the people who were in San Antonio. When I first got there on Sunday night, it was only the preachers who were kind of there for a conference. FEMA conference was happening later on in the week. So the people I kept on seeing around town were all preachers. And I noticed, of the 1,800 preachers, we all have kind of this distinctive kind of thing, this look about ourselves. First of all of us are slightly overweight. All right? We just don't take care of ourselves enough. We're not fit people, okay? And I noticed that about all of our clergy. No matter, male, female, old, young, black, white, Asian, Hispanic, whatever. We were all slightly overweight. The other thing I noticed about all of us preachers is that we all would talk to people. We couldn't shut up. And I tried. I kind of just was watching people. They would just kind of go and say hi to the shopkeeper or the homeless person and people cleaning up San Antonio. It was just funny. I was like, man, we really have this reputation of being kind of nice, right? And this is not just Methodist here. This was Methodist, Presbyterian, Baptist, Catholics, Lutherans, everybody. And it got to the point by Wednesday or Thursday, as I was wandering around San Antonio, I'd say, oh, that's a preacher. That's a preacher. They didn't even have to have a name tag on it. I can tell you that was a preacher. But the one thing that's set above all these clergy and ministers who were there more than anything else is what they all seemed to be content. They all seemed to be happy. They all seemed to be self-assured. And that surprised me. Because, I talked to many people, and I'm not saying preachers are always happy, because they aren't. I talked to many who were struggling with things in their churches and with their lives that were really horrible. And yet, there was some sort of resolve that many of us brought with us as we attended that conference to learn about how to preach better. Well, and I started thinking about that because I ended up encountering a lot of people that week. San Antonio is about 1.5 million people live there. It doesn't look that big when you're down there, but it kind of sprawls out for miles and miles. And even my Uber driver was fun to talk to. I had 2 Uber drivers and never been on Uber before. And I was kind of, scared about how Uber worked. I was afraid I'd be sent off to some alleyway somewhere and beaten up. That's kind of, anybody think that when you get to a cab in New York? But one thing I noticed about a lot of these people is that they were stressed out and angry and full of division. And we live in a world of great divisions, don't we? Our election revealed to us at least one major division between two sides of a political side. And I also think we seem to be living in a world that has lost its idea of truth. We cannot even seem to grasp that there may even be a truth for us to have. There's nothing to, I don't have cable at the house here, and so I was flipping through the channels on the TV, and I don't know what, there's so many scandals that happened that week, I don't know which one to talk about. But it seemed like, you turn to Fox News and they'd say one thing, you turn to CNN and it would say something totally different, right? And I just couldn't get a sense of where we were as a country. And it's funny, 3 of the sermons and workshops that I attended, the people were talking about how to preach in a post-truth society. It was a topic of conversation, how to preach in a post-truth society. And no one could really give me an answer there either. Honestly, they didn't know what they were talking about because a lot of them were seminary professors, and I don't think they're around real people. Truth is, we are fractured by the role of government. We are fractured over racism. We are fractured over human sexuality and gender identity. And the thing is, we're not even only fractured, we're also combative, right? Everyone rants and raves, whether in person or on Twitter or in a Facebook comment. And we see that even in our own community as we talk about the town or whatever we have a disagreement with about. You see it on Facebook, right? Just think about how that happens across the whole United States. Everybody seems to be divided. We live in a world where children and teenagers take their own lives because of what people say about them on social media. And in the past week, like I mentioned in our prayer, we saw that young man killed at a bus stop, or the men killed on the commuter train. And the thing is, we allow lies to damage all that we believe in. We've allowed the lies about race and religion to rise up and create violence that harms people. But it's not only this combative nature and this fracturedness that we have in this world, but it's also many of us are disappointed. Are you disappointed sometimes? I think we're disappointed that the economy hasn't lived up to our expectations. We're frustrated that our wages have remained stagnant for the past 30 years as the cost of living has creeped up faster than our raises. And I was reading an article a couple of weeks ago that said that we are making less money now than buying power than we were in 1980. And that our children are going to make even only about 90% of what we made as we were coming up in our lives. We mourn and we are worried about our children and our grandchildren who are wrestling with debt that's higher than what our first house cost in the 1970s. Did you know the average college debt that people graduate with now is $36,000? That's the average for a 4-year institution of higher learning. I know people who bought their house for $2,400 in 1950, right? $36,000. I like to look at my own higher education costs. I like to say that I have a Mercedes-Benz that I will never drive. Right? I discovered, though, a group of people who still had faith despite all of the bad things in this world. I had 1,800 other clergy with me, all over the world. We had people as far away from Australia and the United Kingdom and Barbados who were there to worship and learn how to preach. I discovered that there were some people who were pursuing God's dream, even in the midst of declining church structures, even in the midst of anger and disappointment and fear and division. Sometimes when I think we read the gospel lesson, we feel divided and separate from that account. We are far removed, it seems like, from those 12 disciples who gathered with Jesus on the night he was betrayed and had that meal with him. We are far removed from those 11 that were hiding in that upper room in the week after Jesus died and he was crucified. Sometimes I think we're far removed from the women who were at the foot of the cross, who were there weeping. And sometimes we read the Bible as if it were a history book, but not as a living book that is there for us now. And yet, when we do hear it and when we read it, we're not that far removed from what was going on for the disciples. Today we hear from the words of the Gospel of John, words prayed for by Jesus and his disciples for his church. He prayed for his disciples in the hours before Judas betrayed him. And if you remember that time in the garden, the disciples were sleeping. Jesus had to keep on telling them to stay awake. And you remember at that time, the disciples lived under Roman occupation. They didn't have any rights or freedoms. You'll remember they lived at a time when maybe they could hope for 40 or 50 years of life before they died a death. You'll remember that the early church was full of divisions and persecutions and violence and fear. And yet Jesus is there in that garden praying for all that was happening at that time, but also praying for what was going to happen after his death and his resurrection. And then even praying for us as he thought about the future, as he thought about the struggle that we would have as followers of God. And what is it that Jesus prays? What is it that Jesus says we need to hear in that gospel? Well, in verse 11 of chapter 17, Jesus prays, "Holy Father, protect them in your name that you have given me, so that they may be one as we are one. You see, Jesus was praying for our unity. Jesus is praying that the disciples be protected from the chaos of this world. Jesus is praying for those who believe in him, and across the ages, he includes us in that prayer too. And just a few verses later in chapter 17, Jesus prays that God protects us from the evil one. Jesus prays for us, the ones who seek truth, that we may be protected from the violence, the chaos, and the confusion of this world. One thing I was reminded of at that convention was that we need to get out of this idea of seeing the Bible as something that happened in the past. It's not a history. It's not just a group of stories. It is God's story of a relationship with humanity. It is God's story of God's relationship with us. Jesus and his life and his death and his resurrection is the good news for this world. And even before that good news is totally fulfilled in the Gospel of John, Jesus is praying for our protection. Now, on many of my 4-minute long elevator trips up to my room, I had people in the elevator with me. It was like the engineer who was trying to get the air conditioning to work, or one of the maids who was taking care of my room, or inevitably though, we had a FEMA conference going on, and so it was generally these big, tall, fit guys who were there as first responders who always had all these radios on them. I don't know what that's all about, but you can imagine, right? They're just always covered, festooned with things, and a couple of other conferences were going on. But I did tell you earlier that clergy tend to be talkative, right, and friendly, and I kind of live into that. Slightly fudgy too, but and so I would talk to these people, and I would say, "Well, why are you here?" It's amazing how just a simple question like that would open up conversation on that 4-minute trip. We would talk about why they were here, and they would be excited about going to the FEMA conference to help prevent wildfires or whatever they were doing. And the education person was all excited about learning about new educational techniques for the higher education. And we had, the engineer was happy to be there. He has this whole building I love working on, the air conditioning unit, and maid says, I love being down here in San Antonio. It was great. It was wonderful to hear all these things from people. Now, when the conversation would turn back to me, they'd say, why are you here? I would say something like, well, I'm a preacher here at a preaching conference. And you know what would happen? Dead silence. Dead silence. They all kind of froze up. And I wasn't sure if it was fear or maybe it was more of, I don't know what to do with you. I tend to think there are some people in this world who think that we just are in a box on Sunday mornings and we just come out of that closet and stand in front of everybody and go back into that closet for the rest of the week. I don't think they can imagine that there was a preacher who did anything outside of just stay around their house all day. There are people who believe that. All I do is stay at the house all the time. But that's not true. So it was funny to realize that my role as a pastor, 50 years ago, a preacher was somebody who was often respected in a community, right? But I encountered people who just had no clue how to act around a preacher. Because it's like they'd never met one before. I don't know. Or maybe there's some other thing going on, like, I don't want to get into an awkward conversation about God. Because they probably thought that was going to happen next. I realized again that we live in a world where our faith often must speak louder than the roles that we have, or even saying that we are Christian. Because I think that puts off a lot of people. One thing I have to say is that I enjoy the sense of contentment that I saw in my fellow clergy, but also the friendliness and the fact that they were willing to talk to anybody. And I have to have this conversation, I think, not only as clergy, but all of us. I think we could be in the same location, that we can be people who are content and know that the good news is the good news. So what do we say to a world that dismisses the good news and pursues fake news? What do we say in a world that seems to have lost its idea of truth? Do we have a message that matters? Do we have a faith that matters on a daily basis? Now, one other experience I had was that I flew out of San Antonio and my flight was delayed. I had hurried to get to my Uber to get there on time to get home and Showed up at the airport, and all of a sudden my flight went from being half an hour delayed to an hour delayed to 2 hours delayed to 3 hours delayed. And then I started worrying about my connecting flight in Atlanta, saying, oh, great, I'm not going to be able to make it in time. And got to Atlanta, and that flight was an hour delayed, and then 2 hour delayed, and then 3 hour delayed. I don't know what was happening, but I didn't get home until around 1 o'clock in the morning. But there's something about waiting for an airline and that can bring out the best in people or the worst in people, right? We've heard a lot about the worst over the last few days, haven't we, with United Airlines pulling people off the planes and all that stuff. Southwest is not like that. Okay, we can talk after church, okay? Right. So there's a sort of camaraderie that comes around at the gate. Anybody ever felt that? I remember a few years ago I was in Atlanta, and this guy had 15 dozen Krispy Kreme donuts. And he was heading back to Seattle, Washington, and he was going to hand these all out to his family. And about after 2 hours of sitting at that gate, you know, all 150 of us are all kind of looking at this guy with his big stack. And he finally gets up and he stands up and he says, okay, fine, y'all can have some donuts. And he handed them all out. So, but that was one experience I had several years ago. And I saw that same sort of camaraderie again at the gate. People were kind to one another. And we were all waiting in line for hours, and it seemed like. And I started having conversations with people around me, and it just struck me that there is a choice that we make in this world about how we can be. We can be frustrated. We could be angry, we could be combative, we can be divisive, right? Or we could choose to be kind. We could choose to be friendly. We could choose to make the right choices to make other people's lives better. And that's what we tend to do, especially at 10 o'clock at night, on a Friday evening when everybody was frustrated by their flight being late. And the truth is, when I started telling people I was a pastor, it just kind of came up naturally. And people continued to talk to me. There was no silence, no awkward silence. It was really nice. And I like to think I didn't scare anybody, but I like to think that I was able to bring some good news to people who were around me. And I realized that as I spoke with people, that it's not just preachers who can be content and who can offer kindness, but we can all do that. In fact, many of the people I spoke to did have a faith in God. They chose to be kind instead of divisive. They spoke words of friendliness rather than anger. Chose to be at peace instead of conflicted. And I met many people who were just content. Now, how many of you have been on a plane and everybody just kind of, as soon as the door opens, everybody stands up next to them? Does that drive you up the wall? You have to wait 15 more minutes. Why are they all standing up? I'm one of those that chooses just to sit there. And my seatmates were like, okay, we're just going to sit here and be content. It was really nice. And that's the kind of way that we can be, that I think as our faith influences our life, that's how we ought to be. When we hear the words of Jesus today, we hear him praying for protection for all of us who believe. We hear his compassion for all of us who know the truth of the good news and the call to love our neighbors and our strangers and God equally. We don't have to be divided or anxious or frustrated even in the midst of disagreements. Instead, we are happy in all that God does for us even now. And I think we should be confident in knowing that there is a message of truth that we are to share with the world, that we do have a faith that matters to others. And as you go out into this world today, I challenge you to put aside your anxiety and your fear and your frustration and your disappointments. And I challenge you to share the good news of Christ to others, and that you may be one with God, and may God protect you always from the evil one. Amen.